The story of oil is not just about energy. It is also about money, power, and the survival of nations. When you hear the phrase, $150 billion oil shock, it may sound like a movie. But this is real. Today we are talking about India, the United States, and Canada. A big change in oil trade is making headlines around the world. India is one of the biggest users of energy in the world. It has decided to buy less oil from America and look to Canada instead. Why did this happen? What does it mean for India's economy? What does it mean for world politics? And how will this decision affect the lives of billions of people? India is the third largest oil importer in the world. Every day, millions of barrels of oil keep its economy moving. But India cannot produce enough oil by itself. It imports about 90% of what it needs. This means transport, industries, and even cooking gas in homes all depend on other countries. For decades, most of India's oil came from the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait. But the world changed in 2022 when the Russia-Ukraine war started. The US and Europe put sanctions on Russian oil. But Russia still had huge amounts to sell. India stepped in. Russia gave big discounts, sometimes $20 or $30 cheaper per barrel. For India, this meant billions in savings. So Indian refiners bought a lot from Russia. This helped India's economy because petrol and diesel prices stayed lower during the time of high inflation. But the United States was not happy. American leaders accused India of helping Russia earn money to fund its war in Ukraine. The US even said India was buying cheap Russian oil, refining it, and selling the products abroad for profit. Tension between India and the US grew. Then another problem came. Under Donald Trump's administration, the US put 50% tariffs on Indian goods. This hurt Indian exporters in textiles, chemicals, and more. It was punishment for India's Russian oil purchases. So India had to ask, if it cannot rely too much on Russia, and if the US uses tariffs as a weapon, where else can it turn? This is where Canada enters the story. Canada is the fourth largest oil producer in the world. For decades, almost all Canadian oil went to the United States through pipelines. But recently, Canada finished new projects like the Trans Mountain expansion. This allowed Canadian oil to reach the Pacific Ocean and be shipped to Asia. For the first time, Canada could send oil to India in a big way. At first, India tested it. Reliance Industries bought 2 million barrels from Canada. Then Indian Oil Corporation bought 7 million barrels, with part of that from Canada. It was small compared to India's total demand, but symbolically it was very important. It showed that India was ready to diversify. Now let's talk about costs. Shipping oil from Canada to India takes about 35 days, compared to only a week from the Middle East. This adds around $1 per barrel in transport costs. But Canadian oil is often sold at a discount of $5 to $10 per barrel. That makes it profitable for Indian refiners. India's refineries can also handle the heavy crude Canada produces. So Canadian oil is not just politically smart, but also economically smart. Think about the choices. On one side, America is pressuring India and using tariffs. On the other side, Russia's discounts are shrinking and its political risk is high. Now Canada appears stable, friendly, and offering discounts. For India, Canada is a safe third option. This change is called a $150 billion oil shock. Why? Because every year India spends more than that amount on oil imports. If much of this spending shifts from the US to Canada, it shakes global trade. For American suppliers, it means lost sales. For Canadian suppliers, it means new markets. For India, it means savings and stronger negotiating power. The global picture also changes. For decades, Canada depended on the US as its only customer. Now, by selling to India, Canada has more freedom. The US, for the first time, must compete with India for Canadian oil. For Russia, this is bad news. India was one of its biggest customers after Europe stopped buying. If India turns away, Russia will need to sell even more to China or offer bigger discounts. For the Middle East, it's a reminder to stay competitive, because India is always looking for alternatives. And what about ordinary Indians? Oil prices directly affect petrol, diesel, food, and transport. Even a $2 saving per barrel means billions saved each year. This helps control inflation and gives the government more money for development and welfare. Politically, the message is clear. India will not bow to pressure from any single country. It will buy oil wherever it is cheapest and most reliable. That is called strategic autonomy, making decisions in India's own interest. Of course, there will be challenges. Canada is far away and supply chains take time to build. The US may push back with more tariffs. But now India has a bargaining chip. If the US pressures too much, India can turn to Canada. If Russia cuts discounts, India can turn to Canada. If the Middle East raises prices, India can turn to Canada. This is the power of diversification. It gives India leverage in every negotiation. This $150 billion oil shock is not a sudden crisis. It is a strategy. India is telling the world, we will not be trapped between two sides. We will chart our own course. And now that course runs through Canada's oil sands, across the Pacific, and into Indian ports. The world is watching closely. Because what India does today will affect oil prices and global trade tomorrow.